The bitter January wind was a physical assault, slicing through my thin coat with the precision of a razor. I hunched my shoulders and rushed through the heavy glass doors of Soryu, the upscale Korean restaurant that had been my entire world for exactly 3 months and 2 days. My fingers were numb, my nose a raw, cherry red from the cold, and the meticulously styled afro I'd left my apartment with now felt like a damp, limp cap around my face. I was already 10 minutes late, a cardinal sin in the world of fine dining. Amara, where have you been? Dennis, the floor manager, hissed the moment I pushed through the swinging doors into the controlled chaos of the kitchen. He was a small, perpetually flustered man, but tonight his eyes were wide with a level of panic I'd never seen before. He grabbed a pristine white apron from a hook and thrust it at me. Table 7, VIP. You're serving them tonight. My stomach plummeted.
What?
But that's Brenda's section. I protested, my clumsy, frozen fingers fumbling with the strings of the apron as I tried to wrap it over my simple, light blue dress. She always gets the private room. Dennis gripped my shoulders, his fingers digging in with surprising strength. Brenda called in sick. Food poisoning. Listen to me, Amara. He lowered his voice, his gaze darting nervously towards the kitchen pass. These people are important. I mean, very important. Don't screw this up. The intensity in his voice made my stomach clench into a tight, painful knot. I could only nod, smoothing down the front of my dress with a trembling hand. I needed this job. I needed it more than I needed air. 6 months ago, I had fled Atlanta in the dead of night with nothing but a single suitcase, a bus ticket, and the meager savings I'd managed to hide. My ex-boyfriend's suffocating control had finally escalated into something truly frightening, and New York was supposed to be my sanctuary, my fresh start. But fresh starts were crushingly expensive, and my tiny, drafty apartment in Queens devoured the majority of my paycheck before I even had a chance to count it. This job, with its generous tips, was the only thing keeping me from sinking. Who are they? I asked, my voice barely a whisper as I grabbed my notepad and a pen. Dennis's eyes darted around the kitchen again, as if the walls themselves had ears. Business associates of Mr. Kwan, he murmured, the name dropping into the humid kitchen air like a stone. My blood ran cold. Everyone who worked at Soryu, from the head chef down to the dishwashers, knew about Mr. Jinwoo Kwan. He was the mysterious, phantom owner who rarely made an appearance, but whose name was always whispered with a potent cocktail of fear and profound respect. I'd never seen him, but the rumors circulated like steam from the soup pots. Some said he was just an incredibly wealthy and private businessman with a portfolio of successful ventures. Others, the ones who spoke in hushed tones late at night after their shifts, claimed he was far more than that. They whispered of deep, unshakable connections to the Korean-American underworld, of a vast and shadowy empire. They whispered that he was a powerful Korean Mafia boss, a man whose influence stretched far beyond the elegant walls of his restaurants. There in the private room in the back, Dennis continued, snapping me out of my thoughts. Remember the training, Amara. Professional, efficient, invisible. Invisible. For the past 6 months, that had been my mantra, my survival strategy. Keep your head down, blend in, become background noise. I took a deep, steadying breath and pushed through the kitchen doors. The main dining room of Soryu was a study in understated elegance. Warm, modern lighting glowed from recessed fixtures, reflecting off polished dark wood floors and minimalist decor. It exuded a sleek, confident wealth that didn't need to shout to be heard. I moved through the tables with the practiced grace of a seasoned waitress, spine straight, chin up, just as I'd been trained. I navigated past the bustling main area, down a short, quiet hallway carpeted in thick, sound-dampening wool, to the private dining room reserved for special guests. I hesitated for a fraction of a second at the heavy, dark wooden door, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Then I knocked once softly and entered. The room was dimmer than the main dining area, the lighting golden and intimate, casting long shadows. A large, round lacquered table dominated the space, and seated around it were 6 Korean men in suits that looked like they were spun from shadows and money. Their quiet, intense conversation halted the instant I stepped inside. 6 pairs of dark, assessing eyes turned to me, but only one gaze truly connected with mine, locking on with an intensity that seemed to suck the air from my lungs. He sat at what was clearly the head of the table, though I couldn't explain how a round table could even have a head. He possessed an aura of absolute authority that bent the very geometry of the room around him. He wore a perfectly tailored black Mafia suit, the kind I'd only ever seen in movies, paired with a stark, crisp white collared shirt, unbuttoned at the neck. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and a sharp, sculpted jawline was shadowed with precisely maintained stubble. But it was his eyes that froze me in place. They were dark, fiercely intelligent, and utterly, chillingly cold. They seemed to see everything, to strip away all pretense and look straight into the core of you. He didn't look much older than 35, far younger than I would have expected for a powerful Korean mafia boss who commanded such obvious, silent deference from the older, formidable men around him. I dropped my gaze immediately, a hot flush creeping up my neck. I felt exposed, analyzed, and dismissed all in a single, silent moment. "Good evening, gentlemen," I began, my voice miraculously steady. "I'm Amara, and I'll be your server tonight. May I start you with some drinks?" I moved around the table with forced efficiency, my senses on high alert. I was hyper-aware of the headman's eyes following my every movement, a tangible weight on my back. I took orders for rare whiskeys, expensive cognacs, and premium soju. When I reached him last, he didn't immediately respond to my quiet inquiry. He simply watched me, a long, unnerving silence stretching between us. "You're new," he said finally. His voice was low and smooth, like polished river stones, and carried a quiet power that resonated deep in my bones. It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact. "Yes, sir." 3 months, I replied, my pen hovering over my notepad, my knuckles white. A ghost of a smile, so fleeting I almost missed it, touched his lips. "Whiskey. Neat." I nodded, my throat suddenly dry, and turned to leave. Just as I reached the door, it opened, and another man in a black suit, broader and more imposing than the others, entered the room. He nodded respectfully to the table before approaching the headman. He bent low and whispered something in his ear. The headman's cool, composed expression didn't change by a single flicker, but I saw a new tension settle across his broad shoulders, a subtle shift from relaxed authority to alert command. I used the moment to slip out, releasing a breath I didn't even know I'd been holding once the heavy door clicked shut behind me. When I returned with a heavy tray laden with crystal glasses, the atmosphere in the room had changed dramatically. The quiet conversation had ceased entirely. The air was thick with a palpable tension. Voices were lower, almost conspiratorial, and the men's faces were more serious, their expressions grim. I distributed the drinks in complete silence, my movements swift and practiced, trying my best to be the invisible servant Dennis wanted me to be. As I placed the glass of amber whiskey in front of the headman, my phone vibrated in my apron pocket. Normally, I would have ignored it. Personal calls were strictly forbidden during shifts. But for the past week, my phone had been a lifeline. My grandmother, my Nana, the only family I had left in the world, was in hospice care back in Atlanta. I had kept my phone on me constantly, my stomach in a perpetual state of dread, waiting for this call. After placing the last drink, I stepped back against the wall, my heart hammering, and discreetly checked the screen. It was her nurse's number. My heart lurched violently. I glanced at the table. They were deep in a hushed, intense conversation. Legal-looking documents spread between them. I took 2 silent steps back toward the door, turning my body away from them, and answered quietly. "Hello," I whispered into the receiver. The nurse's voice came through, soft and regretful. As she spoke, relaying the news I had been dreading, a lifetime of habit, a fundamental part of my identity that I had carefully suppressed, took over. The carefully neutral, professional American accent I'd painstakingly cultivated to blend in, to be unremarkable in New York, completely melted away. In its place, without any conscious thought, emerged the perfect, soul-inflected English of my childhood. It was the English my Korean mother had spoken, the accent and cadence I had absorbed at her knee. Every vowel softened, every consonant shifted, the rhythm of my speech becoming unconsciously, unmistakably Korean. It was the voice of my heart, the voice I used only with the people I loved, a voice I hadn't realized I still possessed with such fluency. I closed my eyes against the sudden sting of tears, my free hand curling into a tight, white-knuckled fist at my side. I ended the call with a choked whisper of thanks, blinking furiously to hold back the tears. When I opened my eyes, a horrifying sight greeted me. The entire table was silent. The hushed conversation had stopped dead. All eyes were on me. But the headman's gaze was different from the others. It was sharper now, more focused, his head tilted slightly as if he was seeing me, truly seeing me, for the very first time. I realized with a sinking, sickening feeling that my complete and instantaneous shift in speech had been noticed. In this room, with these men, it was a colossal, unforgivable mistake. I apologize for the interruption, I stammered, my carefully constructed American accent rushing back in, sounding clumsy and false even to my own ears. I quickly slipped my phone back into my pocket. Would you like to order your meals now? The dinner proceeded with excruciating, nerve-shredding slowness. I moved like a ghost, in and out of the room, bringing courses, refilling drinks, clearing plates. Each time I entered, I felt the headman's eyes on me, a heavy, analytical gaze that seemed to follow my every movement with an unnerving interest that made my skin prickle. It was nearly midnight when they finally prepared to leave. I presented the check in a leather folder, which the headman didn't even glance at before handing me a black, featureless credit card. When I returned with the receipt, he signed it with a flourish I couldn't read, and then held it out to me. "Thank you, Amara," he said, and the way my name rolled off his tongue, so precisely and deliberately, sent a shiver down my spine. An hour later, I was finally finished cleaning up the private room. The restaurant was nearly empty, and I was exhausted to my bones. The grief over my grandmother was a heavy shroud, weighing on my heart. I needed to book a flight to Atlanta, to see her one last time, to say goodbye. But flights were expensive, and even with the shockingly extravagant tip he had left, more than I made in a week, I wasn't sure I could afford a last-minute ticket. Amara, I jumped as Dennis appeared silently beside me. "Mr. Kwan would like to speak with you before you leave." My stomach dropped through the floor. "Mr. Kwan? He's here." Dennis gave me a strange, unreadable look. Of course. He was at table 7-inch. The room spun slightly. The headman, the one whose eyes had followed me all night, who had watched me with such laser-like intensity after my phone call, was Jin-woo Kwan, the owner, the powerful Korean Mafia boss whose name everyone whispered. Dennis led me to the small, windowless office at the back of the restaurant. Mr. Kwan sat behind a large mahogany desk, his suit jacket removed, the sleeves of his pristine white shirt rolled up to reveal strong, sinewy forearms. A single desk lamp cast long, dramatic shadows across his face, emphasizing the sharp angles of his cheekbones. The large man I'd seen earlier, clearly his bodyguard, stood impassively by the door, a mountain of silent menace. "Sit, please," Mr. Kwan said, his voice calm and quiet as he gestured to the chair in front of his desk. I sat on the very edge of the seat, my back rigid, my hands folded tightly in my lap to hide their trembling. "You speak English like a native of Seoul," he said without preamble, his dark eyes never leaving my face. I swallowed, my mouth suddenly as dry as dust. "My mother was Korean, sir. I grew up bilingual." He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable, as if he were fitting pieces of a complex puzzle together in his mind. "And the call you received tonight? Bad news from home, I take it." "My grandmother, she's very ill," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. "The nurse said I should come as soon as possible, to my absolute horror. The tears I'd been holding back all night welled in my eyes and began to spill down my cheeks. Something flickered across his face then. It wasn't quite sympathy, it was too cold for that. But it was something akin to understanding. He opened a drawer in his desk and removed a slim black folder, sliding it silently across the polished surface toward me. "Open it." With hesitant, trembling fingers, I flipped it open. Inside was a first-class plane ticket to Atlanta, departing the next afternoon. Tucked beside it was a thick envelope. When I peeked inside, my breath hitched. It was filled with more cash than I had ever seen in one place. I looked up at him, my mind a maelstrom of confusion and suspicion. I don't understand. I find myself in need of someone with your particular linguistic skills," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I must travel to Los Angeles for a business trip. My usual translator has fallen ill. The trip is for 2 weeks. The ticket to see your grandmother is yours, as is the advanced payment for your services if you agree to work for me during this time." It seemed too perfect, a flawless, impossible solution to my desperate problem. And that made it terrifying. What would this work entail, exactly? The corner of his mouth curved upward in a faint, knowing smile. "Translation during meetings. Some light administrative assistance. Nothing beyond your capabilities, I assure you." I stared at the ticket, at the lifeline it represented, the chance to say goodbye. But at what cost? "Why me?" I asked, forcing myself to meet his intense gaze. "There must be dozens of professional translators you could hire on a moment's notice." Something dangerous flickered deep in his eyes. "I prefer someone authentic. Someone who understands the nuances of both cultures. And I find I prefer someone I've personally vetted. Vetted." The word sent a fresh chill down my spine. How much could he possibly know about me? "The flight to Los Angeles leaves at 3 tomorrow afternoon. If you accept my offer, a car will pick you up at your apartment at noon." He knew where I lived.
Of course he did.
"Employee records," he said smoothly, anticipating my unspoken question, but the look in his eyes told me it was much, much more than that. I stood on shaky legs, the folder clutched in my hand like a talisman. As I turned to leave, his voice, low and cool, stopped me at the door.
"Amara."
"Your grandmother doesn't have much time." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Neither do you." The implied threat hung in the air between us, as sharp and cold as the January wind outside. I hurried out of the office, past the stoic bodyguard, through the now empty restaurant, and into the night. Despite every alarm bell screaming in my head, I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that I would be in that car at noon tomorrow. At precisely noon, a sleek black SUV with windows so dark they looked like polished obsidian pulled up to my curb. The driver, a broad-shouldered Korean man with a military short haircut and an impassive expression, got out, took my single suitcase from my hand without a word, and opened the rear door. "Where's Mr. Kwon?" I asked as the car pulled smoothly away from the curb. "Meeting you at the airport, Ms. Adewale," he replied, his eyes meeting mine for a brief, professional moment in the rear-view mirror. At the airport, I was escorted not to the bustling main terminal, but through a private entrance I never knew existed. There were no lines, no security theater. The driver handed me off to a petite, impeccably dressed woman in a crisp suit who introduced herself as Hannah, Mr. Kwon's assistant. "He's waiting for you in the private lounge," she said, her expression professionally neutral as she led me through a series of quiet, luxurious corridors. The lounge was a haven of tranquility, all soft lighting, plush seating, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the tarmac. And there, standing by those windows with his back to me, was Jin-Woo Kwon. Today he wore a charcoal suit that seemed to absorb and reflect the light in equal measure. "Amara," he said, turning as we entered. My name sounded different in his mouth, imbued with a weight it had never had before. "I'm pleased you decided to join me." "I need to see my grandmother," I stated, clutching my purse strap like a lifeline. Something that might have been respect flickered in his dark eyes.
"Direct."
"I appreciate that." A server appeared, as if from thin air with coffee. Mr. Kwon gestured for me to sit on a plush leather sofa. "We arrive in Los Angeles this evening. A car will take you to the airport first thing in the morning for your flight to Atlanta. After you have had time with your grandmother, you will fly back to LA. After that, I will need you for a dinner meeting. For the next 20 minutes, he outlined my duties with cold precision. When he had finished, he leaned back and asked, "Do you have any questions?" 1,000, but only one that truly mattered. Why me? Really? He studied me for a long, silent moment, his expression completely unreadable. Then he reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out another slim folder, placing it on the coffee table between us. "Open it." My hands trembled as I flipped it open. The first thing I saw was a photograph of me, beaming, at my college graduation from Emory University, my arm wrapped tightly around my smiling grandmother. Next to it was a copy of my degree. Then came pages and pages of what looked like a comprehensive background check. Every address I'd ever lived at, my entire employment history, even my credit score. The final page made my blood run cold. It was a copy of the police report I had filed against my ex-boyfriend in Atlanta, complete with the clinical, horrifying photographs of the deep purple bruises he had left on my wrists and throat. I snapped the folder shut, a wave of nausea washing over me. "How did you get this?" I whispered, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and rage. "I make it my business to know who works for me." Amara, his voice was softer now, almost gentle, but it held no warmth. "To answer your question, I chose you because you are qualified, you are desperate, and you have no connections that would make you a security risk." "No connections?" "I have my grandmother. A dying grandmother." He cut in, his words clinical and cruel. "No parents, both deceased."
"No siblings."
"An abusive ex-boyfriend you were brave enough to flee. Few friends in New York. You work hard. You keep to yourself, and you try to be invisible." His dark eyes bored into mine, seeing far too much. "But you are never invisible to me, Amara." A profound chill ran down my spine. "Our flight is ready," he said, standing abruptly. In a complete daze, I followed him through another private exit, directly onto the tarmac where a sleek private jet waited, its engines already humming. Of course, men like Jin Woo Kwon, powerful Korean mafia bosses, didn't wait in boarding lines or sit among strangers. The interior was all cream leather and polished darkwood. I sank into a buttery leather seat, acutely aware that I was now truly trapped, 30,000 feet in the air with a man who had investigated every dark corner of my life, a man who was everything I had run from, and worse. We landed in Los Angeles as the sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple. We were driven to a sprawling, minimalist penthouse that seemed to float above the glittering city lights. "The car will be here to take you to the airport at 7 a.m., Mr. Kwon stated, not asking. He paused, watching my reaction. "I have also taken the liberty of arranging a consultation for your grandmother. A specialist in geriatric oncology from Johns Hopkins is flying to Atlanta to see her tomorrow morning." I stared at him, utterly speechless. This went far beyond a simple job offer. This was an act of profound control and, in a strange, unsettling way, of incredible generosity. "Why?" I finally managed to ask. "I dislike wasted journeys," he said simply, his gaze cool and distant. "It would be unfortunate if your grandmother's condition were to decline before you could make full use of your talents for me." His callousness was jarring, yet his actions meant that my Nana, who had only ever had state-provided care, would now be seen by one of the best doctors in the country. The next day, I flew to Atlanta in a blur of anxiety and disbelief. At the hospice, the head nurse confirmed everything, her eyes wide with awe. "The new doctor Mr. Kwon sent is a miracle worker. We've never seen anything like it. He's adjusted her medications, and your grandmother is so much more comfortable." My Nana was weak, her body frail, but her eyes, the same warm, deep brown as mine, lit up with a fierce joy when she saw me. "My Amara," she whispered, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. We spent hours talking, her mind clearer than it had been in months. "And this man who brought you home?" she asked suddenly, her gaze sharp and piercing. "Who is he to you?" He's my employer, Nana. Just my employer. I lied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. She squeezed my hand with surprising strength, her eyes holding mine. Be careful, Amara. Men like that, they take what they want. I returned to Los Angeles that evening, my emotions a tangled, chaotic mess of grief for my Nana's inevitable decline, profound gratitude toward the man who was easing her suffering, and a persistent, gnawing unease about his motives. He was waiting for me at the penthouse, standing on the balcony, a solitary figure against the backdrop of the city. He had arranged a dinner meeting for that night. Laid out on the bed in my room was a stunning black cocktail dress that looked to be exactly my size, and beside it a small velvet box containing a delicate diamond necklace. Tonight is important, he told me as we prepared to leave. He was once again in a flawless black Mafia suit and white shirt, the very picture of menacing power and elegance. We are meeting with 4 businessmen from the old country. They prefer to speak Korean, even though they are fluent in English. It makes them feel they have an advantage. And you're letting them think they do, I guessed, beginning to understand the intricate games he played. A small, cold smile touched his lips.
Precisely.
You will translate everything for me accurately. But, he paused, his eyes locking with mine, if they say anything particularly revealing or unguarded, a private sentiment, a hidden detail, I want you to give me a signal. Simply touch your necklace. The dinner took place at another exclusive, private Korean restaurant. The men were older, oozing a confident, old-world authority. The conversation, entirely in Korean, flowed from business to reminiscences, to subtle, probing questions about me, which I deflected with polite smiles. I translated discreetly, leaning close to Mr. Kwan's ear, acutely aware of the warmth radiating from him, the faint, clean scent of his cologne. The true purpose of the meeting, I soon gathered, was a logistics and shipping company he wanted to acquire, a company in which all 4 men held a stake. The negotiations grew heated, the politeness of the meal giving way to blunt, aggressive posturing. Then, during dessert, one of the men, a sharp-eyed, hawk-faced rival I now knew was named Minjun Choi, leaned toward his companions. Believing I was just a pretty accessory and that Mr. Kwan wouldn't understand the colloquial, rapid-fire Korean, he spoke. He talked about a series of untraceable shipping containers moving through the port of Long Beach, the real, illicit value of the company that wasn't on any official books. My fingers, acting on their own accord, instinctively went to the cool diamond at my throat. Mr. Kwan's eyes flicked to my hand for a nanosecond, then back to Choi, his expression never changing. Gentlemen, he said smoothly in perfect English, cutting through their Korean chatter. I believe we are making progress. Allow me to propose a revised offer. He then outlined a new set of terms that included, to the absolute shock and horror of the other men, full, immediate inventory and control rights to all shipping assets, specifically mentioning the manifest logs for all untraceable containers originating from Busan. The 4 Koreans froze, their faces a mixture of fury and disbelief. Choi's eyes, now cold and hard as stone, narrowed as they fell on me. You said she was just an assistant, he spat in Korean, his voice dripping with venom. I said she was my associate, Mr. Kwan corrected, his own Korean flawless and cold as ice. And a very valuable one. The atmosphere in the room crackled with unspoken threats. I had exposed their secret, their hidden leverage. By the time the men left, a deal had been reached, one that clearly and overwhelmingly favored Mr. Kwan. Choi was the last to leave. His eyes were slits of cold fury as they moved between us. You should be more careful about who you trust, Kwan, he said, his gaze lingering on me with undisguised contempt. Beautiful women have a way of complicating matters. I trust Ms. Adewale implicitly, Mr. Kwan replied, his tone flat and final, leaving no room for argument. When the door closed behind them, he turned to me and for the very first time, he smiled. It was a genuine, unguarded smile that transformed his harsh, handsome face, and it sent an unwelcome flutter through my stomach. You are perfect, he said, his voice low as he led me back toward the penthouse study. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, without asking. "Those containers," he said, handing me a glass. "They are important. Illegal goods," I stated, my voice flat. His eyes met mine over the rim of his glass. "Let's just say they are the true profit center of the business." He moved closer, his presence seeming to fill the entire room, making it hard to breathe. "You have proven your value tonight, Amara. I want you to understand what you are a part of now." "A part of?" I echoed, taking an instinctive step back. "I am here for 2 weeks. I am here to translate. That is our arrangement." Something dark and possessive flared in his eyes. "Arrangements can change." He closed the distance between us, placing a hand on the bookshelf beside my head, effectively caging me in. "You felt it tonight. How well we work together. How perfectly you fit into my world." "I don't belong in your world," I whispered, my voice betraying me with its tremor. "Don't you?" His free hand came up to touch the diamond necklace at my throat, his fingers brushing against my skin, sending a jolt of electricity through me. Before I could process, before I could protest, his lips were on mine. The kiss was brief, almost hesitant, questioning rather than demanding. He pulled back before I could decide whether to respond or resist. "Good night, Amara," he said softly, stepping away. I fled, my heart hammering, my lips burning, my mind a complete chaos of conflicting emotions. The next few days passed in a blur of high-stakes meetings and tense, clandestine negotiations. I was a silent observer, a conduit through which languages and secrets passed. I saw a side of Jinwoo Kwon that was ruthlessly brilliant, a master strategist who was always 3 steps ahead of his opponents. But I also saw flashes of something else, a profound loneliness in his eyes when he stood on the balcony late at night, a flicker of vulnerability when he asked, with genuine concern, for updates on my grandmother's condition. His housekeeper at the penthouse, a kind, older woman named Mrs. Kim who treated me with a gentle pity, pulled me aside one morning as I was getting coffee. "Be careful, child," she whispered in Korean-accented English, her eyes full of a sad wisdom. "You are not the first. There have been other women. Beautiful women. He brings them here, they stay for a while, and then they are gone." Her words were a cold, necessary dose of reality. I was a temporary asset, a beautiful, useful tool that would be discarded when my purpose was served. Her warning came just in time. That evening, we were scheduled to attend a private gallery opening in Beverly Hills. I was dressed in an elegant silk gown he had provided, feeling more like a doll than a person. As we were preparing to leave, his head of security, a stoic, silent man named Taehyun, rushed into the penthouse, his face grim. "Sir, it's a trap. We have intelligence that Minjun Choi has tipped off the feds. They're planning a raid at the gallery tonight, timed for your arrival." Jinwoo's posture changed instantly, from relaxed elegance to coiled, dangerous energy. "We need to leave. Now, we didn't take the main elevator." Taehyun led us through the kitchen to a service exit and down a freight elevator into the depths of the parking garage. A different, nondescript sedan was waiting, its engine already running. As we pulled away into the night, I looked up and saw, in a lighted window of a building across the street, the distinct silhouette of Minjun Choi, a triumphant smile on his face. "He set us up," I said, the realization dawning. Jinwoo nodded, his expression hard as granite, as he watched the city lights flash by. "He wants what I have. My territory, my network. And he thinks you are my weakness." "Am I?" The question slipped out before I could stop it, a whisper in the dark, luxurious car. His eyes met mine, and in their depths, I saw something fierce and possessive. "Yes," he said simply, the word landing with the force of a physical blow. "You are." The car sped through the night, a silent cocoon moving through a hostile world. "What happens now?" I asked finally. "Now, we adapt. We leave Los Angeles tonight." My heart lurched with panic. "Your grandmother will come with us," he said, his tone absolute, brooking no argument. "I have already made the arrangements. A private, fully staffed medical transport will take her to my property in Montana. The specialist from Johns Hopkins will accompany her. She will be safe there, Amara. I promise you. During the flight on his jet, shrouded in darkness as we flew over the sleeping country, he finally gave me the truth, the missing pieces of the puzzle. My father knew your father, he began, his voice low and devoid of its usual cold command. They grew up together in a small village outside Seoul. They were like brothers. When my family came to America to build this organization, your father came with them. He wasn't just an employee, he was my father's most trusted advisor, his right hand. I listened, stunned into silence. My father died in a car accident when I was 4, I said numbly. It was no accident, Amara, Jin-woo said, his voice grim. It was a hit, ordered by a rival family. The attack was meant for my father. Your father was driving. He took the brunt of the impact, shielding my father with his own body. He died protecting my family. He died saving my father's life. It is a debt our family has never been able to repay. He looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw genuine, unguarded emotion in his eyes. When I saw your name, Adewale, on the employee records at Soryu, I knew your mother wasn't Korean. But your file mentioned she was. It was a contradiction. So I looked deeper. When I discovered you were his daughter, at first bringing you here was about that debt. A way to honor his sacrifice by helping his child. But it's not about that anymore, Amara. We landed at a private airstrip in Montana, surrounded by the majestic, imposing peaks of snow-capped mountains. His property wasn't a house. It was a fortress disguised as a stunningly modern mountain lodge, a seamless blend of glass, stone, and dark wood. My grandmother arrived a few hours later and was settled into a state-of-the-art medical suite that was better equipped than the hospice she had left. That evening, I found Jin-woo standing alone on a vast, heated stone terrace, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand, his gaze fixed on the moonlit wilderness. The situation with Choi is manageable for now, he said without turning as I approached. But this is my world, Amara. It will never be completely safe. He finally turned to face me, his eyes serious. What do you want to happen when this is over? For the first time since I'd met him, he was asking me, not telling me. He was giving me a choice. Did I want to return to my lonely, invisible life in New York, forever looking over my shoulder? Or did I want this? The danger, yes, but also the fierce passion, the startling tenderness, the feeling of belonging to someone who looked at me as if I were the most precious, vital thing in his dangerous world. I want to stay, I whispered, the words carrying on the cold mountain air. With you. A wave of profound relief washed over his face, softening his harsh features. I will always want you, Amara. He pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly against him. I am who I am. I can't change that. But I can promise you, you will never be alone again. I will protect you with my life. It wasn't a fairy tale promise of happily ever after. It was something harder, something more real. A promise from a powerful Korean Mafia boss who kept his promises, no matter the cost. That's enough, I said against his chest, and I meant it. My grandmother passed peacefully 6 months later, her hand in mine, with Jin-woo standing a silent, respectful vigil beside us. A year after that, Min-jun Choi's organization imploded after a series of disastrous deals and violent internal betrayals, his influence vanishing from the underworld like smoke. I never asked for the details. Some questions in this new world were better left unasked. 2 years after that first night in Montana, Jin-woo placed a simple, elegant diamond ring on my finger. Our life was not simple or safe, but it was ours, built on a foundation of shared secrets and fierce, unwavering loyalty. It began with a phone call, answered in the wrong accent in front of the right man, a man who heard the truth of who I was beneath the surface and refused to ever let me be invisible again.